Well, hello, everyone. This is Dr. Darian Parker, your host of the Dr. Darian Parker podcast. And as usual, I want to come to you and explain something that's popular in our fitness, health, and well being culture and give it a very large evidence based academic slant with also some real world observational views to give you the full picture of what's happening in a particular topic we're talking about. And today's topic is one I think everyone can identify with, and it's your smartphone. Well, since June 2007, that was a really big year. I think it was June 7th, 2007, which was the debut of the iPhone. And since then, and there were other things before that, such as Blackberries, things of that nature, but the iPhone really changed everything. And we know the adoption rate of that has been pretty much 100%. I mean, you can't go anywhere without someone using their iPhone or their smartphone. In fact, observably, I've seen that most people now just walk with their phones in their hands versus even putting them in their back pocket. So we're now seeing almost this digital prosthesis effect that is happening, this almost merging effect. The question is, though, are smartphones a positive help for your workouts, or are they hindering your workouts? Well, we want to discuss that today because I think this is a really important topic as we see the evolution of smartphone usage and workouts and effectiveness of workouts and how that's managing. Now, we will integrate this with some information related to how music is effectiveness of music during workouts because we have tremendous data on that, but even that's very nuanced. But we're going to stick with something that I think is pretty interesting, and I've seen this so much, and being a lifelong exerciser and as someone who's 48 years old and has been around before smartphones and when there was nothing and you would just go to gyms and there's just music and no one had phones to now where everyone has a phone and it's a pretty isolating situation. I thought, let's look at the research, the evidence-based information about this to see what's actually happening and giving you the best information so you can make the best decisions for this. So, is your smartphone helping or hindering your workouts? That's the topic of today. So we're going to jump into that and we're going to discuss this from a variety of angles. So we're going to look at research, at least the research we currently have on this. And there's robust research over the last 10 years about the psychology behind this in different areas. But in terms of fitness-based research, we have some research, but it's kind of a tale of two stories, and it is not essentially super robust when it comes to sample size. So I wanted to put that disclaimer out there. That's really important to understand that as well. But I think it's important that we start out here and looking at this is really kind of casing this in an interesting way of looking at this. Okay, so I want to give you kind of my just personal take here, which is that I really enjoy smartphone usage. It has been incredibly powerful for my own business in terms of what I do as a personal trainer and iPad usage and things. So this is not me downing it or anything like that. My goal here is just to provide really good information, and then I will provide some observational notes of what I've seen here and what you guys have probably seen as well with this. So it's important to look at this and be understanding of what's happening here, and not to denigrate anyone, but to look at it from a standpoint of like, here's what's happening, here's what you could see with your own eyes, and here's what we've seen in terms of looking at this from the larger perspective of people who are doing this, researchers who are doing this, and then academics and practitioners like myself taking that information and providing it to the public in a way that you could really take and make decisions. In the end, you're going to make your decisions, but information is power. And when you have information, good information, reputable, credentialed information that is well-rounded, you activate your decision-making parts of your brain, and you're able to make best decisions. The worst thing you can do is have no information or just be told something and not looking at it with a large lens. That's how you often make really poor decisions. And in our social media, internet age, many people make poor decisions because of lack of inquiry, curiosity and looking at the whole scope. On this podcast, that will never be the case. We always look at whole things. So, is your smartphone helping your workouts or hurting your workouts here? So, when we look at this, we want to really think about this from kind of a disclaimer point of view, as I mentioned before, kind of this meta-analytic disclaimer. So, before we unpack, the studies here, it's important to look at the research here is really focused on laboratory-based tracking. Okay, so it's not necessarily research that's happening. We took 50 lifters and we're saying, hey, let's look at this real-world lifting. A lot of research, especially in fitness, happens in laboratories with not a lot of big sample size here. But it's a window into telling us what's happening here. So our laboratory tracking really is looking at putting a subject on a treadmill for 30 minutes, handing them a phone, tracking immediate variables like balance, heart rate, things of that nature, intensity, productivity. And then we have kind of the public health sociology lens, which is like, hey, let's give out a survey to thousands of university students and let's map out total screen time against their baseline aerobic fitness. So what are we missing? The disclaimer part is we're missing long-term high-performance tracking studies looking at progressive overload, strength adaptation over 6 to 12 months. This gives us a much better indication of what's happening over time, but we don't have that. But what I will say is we are in a golden era where people have had smartphones, particularly since June 2007. We've had a longer period of time, so we're going to start getting more research, longitudinal research about this. But I will say, just to head this off, that at least the acute data that we do have, it's not good. And what I mean it's not good, it's particularly devastating in the sense that indicating that having your smartphone with you and all of the applications that go with it is particularly devastating to not only workout performance, but mental degradation and enjoyability. So we'll be discussing that. So let's dive into our first study, which is essentially looking at the pre-workout mental drain. Okay, so by Gantois and colleagues from 2021, it's fairly recent. This is published in Perceptual and Motor Skills. So the research, the hypothesis is really wanted to look at what happens when you check your phone before you even lift a weight, you do any type of cardiovascular endurance. What happens? So this is a very small sample size, under 20 people who have been resistance trained adults who know how to do back squat to failure. They're seasoned exercisers, so that helps here. And so basically what they looked at is, hey, they'll have subjects who sat quietly for 30 minutes, scrolling social media, answering texts and all that. On another day, they sat for 30 minutes watching a neutral, low-demand documentary, no interaction going on back and forth. So the task is immediately after they performed sets of squats to failure using 80% of their 1 rep max. And again, very small sample size here, but it gives a small window. So the pre-squat scroll triggered a statistically significant reduction in total repetitions, total volume load, and perception of that. So other thing here, another kicker here is that researchers tracked blood lactate and concentric barbell velocity, and they found 0 physiological differences between the days. So the motivation levels were essentially identical when looking at this. So the loss of strength wasn't muscular or metabolic. The phone caused an isolated state, though, of mental fatigue that altered how they processed effort. So what essentially happens is their central nervous system gave up early. So they caused this brain drain, so where essentially there was no advantage to having the phone for that. And you'll see as we get going here that becomes a very large disadvantage when looking at this here. So looking at your phone ahead of time causes this mental fatigue and decreased neural firing. So you're going into your workout not optimized because your brain, and it's particularly prefrontal cortex and the ACC, which we'll talk about, is being drained ahead of time. So you're actually demotivating yourself before you work out, causing yourself a change in perception of effort before you start working out. Again, I want to say very small sample size. That makes a huge difference. But again, a small window into this. Well, let's look at our study number 2, which looks like the intra-workout disruption, right? So what about using your phone during your session? So right now, one of our best studies is a study of 2025 by Retskis and the Pamquale Journal of Sports Sciences. They looked at this specifically, right? So they compared lifters who used their phones freely between sets versus lifters whose phones stayed on the bench strictly playing music, right? So again, set this scene. This is the difference between someone who, between sets, picks up their phone, starts looking at, like scrolling through TikTok, Instagram, answering texts, whatever it may be, versus someone who's just listening to music and their phone is just somewhere else. They're just listening for that, okay? So what we see here is that in this, the group interacting with the screen suffered a massive statistically significant plunge in subjective workout enjoyment and perceived productivity. Basically, it actively sours your psychological relationship with hard training. Okay, so the group who's using their phone, scrolling, doom scrolling, answering texts, emails, all those things like that, changes how they subjectively look at their workout and changes what they perceive their productivity to be. In particular, what happens is if you were to ask a person who is on their phone quite a bit, let's say they went home, and they do go home. They go home after the workout. Let's say they're with their significant other. Say, "Oh, what'd you do today?" Your perception of what you did will be way off because you actually are not paying attention that much to what you're doing. You're perceiving your productivity to be high, but in actuality, it's fairly low. And it's generally not as enjoyable. One, is you're isolating yourself, and two, you're not really sure of the rhythm of flow of that. Think about every time you pick up your phone during a workout to answer things, scroll, you're actually disrupting the flow of your workout and you're causing mental fatigue. You're getting away from connecting to your body. You've seen this probably plenty of times. We'll talk about some real world discussions related to this, but again, it changes the perceived productivity. We've already had an issue with this. So we know that, and I know that from my 25 years in training, that one of our biggest kind of observational data we have is that people often overestimate how much they're exercising and underestimate how much they're eating. We'll leave the eating part alone here, but people often overestimate how much they're exercising. I do this often with my clients when we'll start with our intake, and I'll say, well, you're exercising before you started with me. How often do you exercise, and how long do you exercise? So if someone tells me, usually about 45 minutes, I say, how much of that is actual physical activity exertion? You know what they say? I don't know. People usually aren't very strict in terms of their work to rest ratio, but I often say, well, if you have your phone with you, and you're taking rest during sets, it's probably much more extended than usual. So a 60-second rest between, let's say, a hypertrophy-based set often ends up becoming 3 to 4 minutes when you add in the phone, because once you pick that phone up, you get locked into this doom scrolling and rabbit hole effect, which often changes your perception of time. And if you're not disciplined and looking at a watch or whatever at your time, you will actually not perceive the amount of time that you're spending. And so we'll talk about what that means physiologically for that as well. So during sets, so what do we know from our peek into this is that it's much better for you to have your phone, but to keep it away from you and to listen to music, but don't have it around you. Get a set list together, work through that, but checking things, scrolling, sitting on a bench, actually deactivates what you were doing, takes you out of the rhythm of what you're doing, and drastically changes your intensity and your perceived productivity of your workout. So let's look at this from a neurobiological blueprint, right? So this brain drain hypothesis is a hypothesis by Ward and May in 2024. This basically looks at that cognitive processing resources are fundamentally finite. And this, we know, is a very accurate assessment because we know in motor learning that You cannot provide too much volume to your brain, too much information. The brain gets overloaded, and cannot focus on too many things at one time. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of coaches and trainers make is trying to have too much volume during workouts, depending on the person's level, history, skill, and how they're feeling for that day. We know that we're only able to cognitively process a finite amount of things before we become overloaded and overwhelmed for that. So we look at this with our phone during our workouts. We're already providing a stimulus by doing exercise, but adding another stimulus, such as having your phone, provides an intense another level of cognitive processing that doesn't sync up well with our workouts because it changes the relationship of what we're doing for that. So when you scroll through an algorithmic feed or reply to a work email or whatever you're doing, that it is your mind is being pulled towards the screen and scrolling and all that stuff, what essentially happening is your brain hub, which is responsible for basically the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. I talked about that before. This is your brain hub that's responsible for effort-based decision making and motor control. This is hyper firing, just firing away when you're looking at your phone between sets. So this creates an intense cognitive workload. And this rapid accumulation of this cognitive processing creates a central nervous system fatigue. What does this do? It blunts your baseline dopamine pathways. So by scrolling on your phone in between workouts, and you're in between your sets or cardiovascular intervals, you're actually blunting the dopamine effect, which is that great effect you're looking for, that feel-good effect for that. So what's the fallout here? One, the anterior cingulate cortex, because this becomes pre-exhausted by that, your rate of perceived exertion, you hit that threshold much earlier in your set. So your brain's saying, hey, we need to stop. We're being overloaded already. And so this is actually causing you, again, to change your perception of your effort and your productivity there. You actually will more than likely be much more effective without touching your phone in between because you'll be more locked into your workout and you'll get much more activity and intensity out of it. The other aspect is a postural and balance decay. So we have data from Rebold and others from 2019 that indicates that smartphone interactions during exercise severely degrades dynamic balance, basically increasing lateral sway and significantly elevating your objective risk for injury during complex and structural lifts for that. So again, all this to say that when you're taking your attention away from a very specific activity through your phone, you're causing this brain drain and you're decreasing your body's ability to be more locked in kinesthetically to what you're doing here. This isn't new. If you just go to any gym, you could see this that's happening to people, right? You think to yourself, I'm locking in by getting music and everything going, and music's a great ergogenic aid. The problem is the music's on your smartphone, and you don't usually have a way to stop, only listen to your music, notifications stop up. You can put notification to stop, but there's a effort barrier there. If there's a lot of work to change all these settings on your phone, people are generally going to go back to conserving their effort for that. But you can see this pretty easily in a gym, that you look at what you're observing and what the person's probably observing is very different, is that you're seeing a very large increase in time between sets, a very large decrease in intensity, and that alone is changing the outcome of the results for that. So let's look at this observational reality. We looked at some research, and again, with our research, I try to keep it as simple as possible so we're not going too deep into the weeds, but giving you the 30,000-foot look at this whole thing here. So let's step out of the laboratory and look at like just observational data, the observational reality that you and I both see, right? And I think what I'm going to tell you is not anything you haven't seen. You've probably seen it, but let's do this thought experiment. Let's look at it, right? So if you're in a gym and you're on a commercial gym floor, what do you see in today's society? What you're probably going to see is the overwhelming majority of people have their phones with them in their hands right next to them. Now, you may see someone doing a set, their phone is somewhere near them, and they go ahead and do that set. So, what do you normally see? Well, in a laboratory environment, you're going to have very strict parameters, right? So, if it's a 90-second rest, it's locked into that. The researchers are there and they're making sure you're not deviating from that. In a gym, that literally never happens. So, what may turn it be a 60-second recovery window that is intended for what you're doing, we all see that someone's sitting on a bench and they have their head down and they're scrolling for minutes. If you time the person, you would see that they're on there for many, many minutes, right? This is defeating the purpose of what they're actually trying to do. But also, on another aspect, it's incredibly rude for actually working in with people. Again, because you're not tapped into what's actually happening, your observed reality has changed so much, you're not even aware of what your environment is doing and how that's affecting other people. So it causes this rest interval drift. Again, nothing that you haven't seen, but in naming it, what is happening, this rest interval drift is really devastating for the outcome of what you're looking to get. And your perception of the outcome changes as well. The other thing is what I like to call kind of a ghost lifter phenomenon. So again, you've all seen it. Again, someone may go on, let's say, a leg press, and they're on there for maybe 25 minutes. Now, if you actually looked at how much time the person was actually pressing, extension at the knee and the hip, you would look at it, it would be very little bit of time, right? So the remaining time is basically just spent slumped over a screen. That's not necessarily training anymore. That's just essentially you being in an office chair and with you getting up every once in a while, do something there. So again, this goes into that rest interval drift, is that being in this altered reality of looking at your phone, scrolling between sets because you're bored, you don't know what to do with yourself, answering texts, emails, all this different stuff, changes your relationship with your observable reality around you. You lose track of your environmental reality, which means you're also losing track of what other people are doing, and you're in this community environment that everyone's using equipment. You're losing track of that reality for that. Next thing is the flexion slump with this, is that deep cervical flexion becomes the standard. So the physical posture of a person between sets often becomes a very negative quotient at this point. Second, someone racks a weight or they drop into severe cervical and thoracic flexion, you start seeing a C-shaped spine, and this becomes the tech neck slump. And we know that there is a tremendous issue with this, that we're seeing people with a tremendous orthopedic issues and their C1, C2, lower lumbar spine, and which is a cascading kinetic chain effect that people are starting to feel lots of stiffness, joint pain in their neck just from being in this deep cervical flexion. So think about it this way. You're doing this very defined activity, let's say resistance training, and you're trying to have correct body alignment and technique, but in between the sets, you were in deep cervical flexion for minutes at a time, which is degrading the quality of your spine, and which your exercise is supposed to be helping the quality of your joints for that. So you're counteracting the effects with that deep cervical flexion for that. So what are you doing? You're collapsing your airway, lowering your core temperature, and you're sending a neurological signal to your body that you are passive and you're resting rather than staying primed for performance that you're doing. Part of the rest is an active rest that you're keeping yourself ready, and it's neurologically, physiologically, psychologically up for being present for the next thing that you're going to do. When you're using your phone between your sets, you're creating actually poor posture, which is counteracting the effects of what you're trying to do during the exercise. The fourth thing, that the observable reality that I see here, is outsourcing of your intuition, and particularly your recreational athletic intuition. True progression when you're working out requires basically kinesthetic and interoceptive awareness. So, scanning your body, feeling your heart rate, going up, decelerating, gauging your readiness for exercise here. When your eyes are locked into a screen, you're severing that loop. You're severing that intuition. So you start the next set simply by finishing, let's say you're reading a caption, you're going through something, and your body's actually not ready to perform. You're actually cutting off that intuition there. One of the things I find really fascinating is that we get in our car. Most people get in their car instead of walking to a gym, but maybe you get into your car. You're stationary. You go to the gym. You'll often park as close as possible to the gym so that you won't have to give the effort of walking further away to the gym. Then you go into the gym. Most of the time, very few people are doing any dynamic moving across the floor activity. Most of the work is done stationary in place, small movements, and then use your phone in between the sets, which is very sedentary and promotes neurological dysfunction, biological joint-based dysfunction, and lack of kinesthetic awareness and promoting readiness for the next exercise here. So essentially, we go to the gym to try to help ourselves, but often spend a lot of time doing things that are counterproductive, all because of a tiny little thing that's in your hand here. So let's look at an actionable protocol and ways we can help ourselves to have a better relationship with our bodies while still using our phone. I'm not doing this and saying get rid of your phone. And listen, you can if you want. I can tell you my own personal story is when I work out, I don't like using my phone. I bring it with me, and then basically for being connected to my family connections, but I never look at it. The phone comes with me into the gym, and then I put it away in a locker or somewhere. I don't even see it when I'm working out. If I have clients with me and we're working virtually, I will have one earpiece in to be connected to my environment. It's very important to me, but I'm also interacting with another person and we're working out together when I'm working out with. I have a client I work out with virtually like that. But if I'm working out on my own, going to a gym, I don't even see the phone. I have no ear pods, nothing. I don't like to sever that connection with my body. That's my own personal thing for that. But let's look at some kind of strategies here. So one thing is before you work out, create a bubble, at least 30 minutes where you are not doing any scrolling or looking at any emails or doing anything related to that. Calm your mind, create a readiness zone for going to work out. I promise when you do this, your workouts are going to be considerably better, considerably better. So try to give yourself that 30-minute period. This is very similar to sleep hygiene. You wouldn't look at your phone for an hour right before you're going to bed and change your neurobiology before that and decrease the opportunity for your body to feel sleepy, to build up that adenosine for that. I know a lot of people do this, and when I counsel people and clients, I say one of the first things you got to do is get rid of your phone out of your room before you go to bed so you can build good sleep habits. Same thing for pre-workout habits. If you want to build appropriate intensity to reach the goals you're looking for, just to have better workouts over time, right? And to have more accurately better workouts, because you may think you're having a great workout, but your perception is often way off because you can't observe your own reality when it's being hijacked by other things within that. It changes your relationship to reality. So cut that out for 30 minutes before. During the workout, once you step on training floor, put your phone into airplane mode so you're not getting any types of notifications, things like that. Make up a playlist that lasts, I don't know, an hour, 45 minutes, and start your workout timer. Actually know what your work to rest ratio is during your workouts here. And put the device out of sight. If it's with you, fine, but put it on somewhere around the gym that you wouldn't go to, or just put it in your gym bag or put it in the locker, because the reality is that we're stimulated all day long by screens. And isn't during your workout, wouldn't that be a great place to not use your screens and look at your screens, to just be connected to your music and the rhythm, or just the effort of your lifting or your running or your walking or whatever it may be there? The fear that I have is that we're entering to a reality where we're never not stimulated. In the gym, or wherever your gym may be, inside a physical building, outside in nature, wherever your gym is for you, it should be a place where you are super connected to your body and the biological signaling that's happening. But because of this smartphone addiction that's happening, we're taking that addiction into all places of our lives, whether it be the gym, whether it be the bathroom, whether it be the bedroom, wherever it is. We have to have time where we're taking that stimulus away from our brain so that we can wander and become more creative. So during the workouts, focus on, have music, which is great. And music that you like is very effective. It's more effective, actually, than a preset thing that the gym is playing, actually. But your phone, the functions on the phone, things like that, leave that to the side. Put your phone somewhere else and focus on your workout. You're there to work out, not look at social media in between your sets. And the cognitive substitution, replace those micro dopamine hits that you're getting between sets with an active recovery strategy. I know for a lot of people, one of the reasons they're using their phones in between sets to scroll and look at Instagram, TikTok, and to answer text messages is because a couple different things. You've rewired your brain to, when you have a break, that you want to continue to get that dopamine hit. Two, you're not used to being bored. It's a reality. You're not used to being bored anymore. You're not used to letting your mind wander without that stimulation. It's going to take some training. You know, the training you're giving to your workouts, you got to do the same thing for your phone usage. My motto always is, everything in life is training, every single thing. And this is no different here. So instead of picking up your phone and looking at it between sets, walk the floor, practice some breathing techniques here, do some mobility drills, and track things on paper instead of on your phone, whatever. But just do active recovery, walk around. You don't have to talk to anybody. I mean, I know people will go to the gym, they don't want to talk. I don't want to talk to anybody when I go to the gym. I want to hit it hard and be connected to it. Maybe that's not your thing, to want to talk to people. Don't talk to people, but spend some time staying within the hole. Stay in that pocket, right? Stay in there. You ever heard a good like live band? You just feel like the drummer and the bassist, they're in the pocket. They're in the zone. When you're on your phone scrolling, you are disconnected from the zone. You are actively pulling yourself away from being connected to your body and the physiological signaling for that, and you alter your actual reality of what you're doing and the effectiveness and the intensity level for it as well. So walk around, be active, keep your body ready for the next set you're going to do. Get locked in. Truly being locked in is an important thing, and we're often not locked in enough in our lives because we're too distracted. Look, the reality of it here as I close here is that intensity is contagious, right? If you go to a gym and everybody is isolated and on their phones and barely exhibiting any intensity, you tend to also lower your intensity to the median. It's just human nature. But if you go in a gym and everybody's working pretty hard, or people are socializing, pushing themselves, connected to their bodies, you tend to alter and lift up your level of intensity as well. For that, intensity is contagious. Effectiveness of workouts are contagious. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a gym doing my thing. Again, I think I'm weird. I know I'm weird. I have nothing on. It's just me locked in. When they see me working hard, I see other people starting to push themselves even harder. Effort is contagious, whether it's higher or lower effort. Okay? So we need to really change the entire culture of working out for the better by having a better relationship with your phone. Put your phone down. Reconnect your brain to the physical movement you're doing during the entirety of it. Claim those performance or neurological upgrades of your workout that it's supposed to give to you. Again, think about this. You're driving to the gym seated. You get up, you walk, you park at the closest parking spot so you can give less effort. You go into the gym, you walk, you go, let's say, lift weights, right? You stay in the same place or walk to another stationary place, and then you sit down on your phone. Most of what you've done is trying to decrease the quality of your workout. And then you give this one effort for, let's say, lifting, doing that. And then your phone adds on to that degradation. And probably the most insidious part is that it alters your objective reality of what you're doing, of how productive you actually have been. So the phone's not a bad thing, but it's like anything. We need to have a better relationship with it. So bring your phone, if you like, to your workouts. The data is clear on music with phones that music is very effective and does help people physiologically, psychologically, to a point, depending on intensity. But we know that the other functions on the phone, both research-wise and observationally, often pull people into this drift that is very damaging, not only to your workouts, but even worse, I think, damaging to your brain, the degradation of your physical reality, and also adding another kick of hurting your spinal cord and deep cervical flexion. And we're getting this digital posture dysfunction that's happening so much more for that. So let's have a better relationship with our phones. Again, my job's not to tell you to stop using your phone, but to have a better relationship with it, especially during our workouts. All right. Thanks, everyone, for this awesome episode. I hope it was very helpful, and I will catch you next time.